When I was 12, my mom's boyfriend dropped me at a gas station and drove away, saying, "Figure life out on your own." Last month, he showed up homeless at the shelter I run. I signed him in, then wrote his name on the bedroll myself. He didn't recognize me until I said, "You left me here once too." So I guess I'll start this off the way people do here. I'm a 32M, and this is probably the heaviest story I'll ever tell online. It's about abandonment, survival, and a kind of revenge that I never planned, but life just delivered right into my lap. The kind of thing that if you saw in a movie, you'd think, nah, that's too on the nose. But it happened. And the thing is, I don't feel good about it. Not in the way you'd think. When I was 12, I lived with my mom and her boyfriend. My real dad had split when I was little, and honestly, I didn't even remember much about him by then. Mom's boyfriend, let's call him Rick, was the closest thing I had to a father figure. Except he wasn't really one. He was one of those guys who's nice when he's drunk, but mean when he's sober. If that makes sense. Like, you'd almost wish he'd stay buzzed all the time because at least then he was goofy instead of cruel. He had this way of making everything my fault. If rent was late, somehow it was because I ate too much food. If he got fired from one of his endless string of jobs, it was because I distracted him. He'd say things like, "Kid, you're nothing but dead weight. World's not going to carry you." Stuff no adult should ever say to a child. The day he left me at that gas station, I can still smell it. Like diesel fumes mixed with hot asphalt. It was July, middle of the afternoon, and we were supposed to be running errands. I thought maybe we were going to the grocery store or something. I remember asking if we could grab some ice cream. He didn't answer. We pulled into this gas station off some county road. It wasn't even in town. It was one of those lonely places with two pumps, a flickering Pepsi sign, and a clerk who looked like he'd been there since the 70s. Rick parked, told me to get out for a second, then reached over, unlocked the glove box, and grabbed his cigarettes. I got out, and before I could even ask what we were doing, he leaned over the passenger seat, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Figure life out on your own." Then he shut the door, started the car, and drove off. I swear, for a good 30 seconds I thought it was a joke. Like he was going to loop around the block, come back, laugh, say, "Gotcha, kid." But he didn't. I stood there with nothing. No backpack, no phone, just the t-shirt and shorts I had on. The clerk came out eventually, asked if I was okay. I remember lying. I said, "Yeah, my mom's coming to get me," because the truth felt too big to say out loud. I ended up sitting on the curb until nightfall. That was the first night I realized what it really means to be disposable. Eventually, a social worker got called. CPS stepped in. I bounced through the system after that. Foster homes, group homes, all of it. Some were decent, some were nightmares. But I survived. Barely. Fast forward 20 years. I won't give you every detail yet, but let's just say I clawed my way out. I went through hell, addiction, depression, sleeping in my car more than once, but I made it. And I made a promise to myself somewhere along the line. If I ever got steady enough, I'd give back. Because I knew what it was like to be 12 years old and alone at a gas station with nobody. So now, at 32, I run a homeless shelter. It's small, not glamorous, barely funded, but it's real. We keep people alive. We give them showers, warm meals, bedrolls on the floor if that's all we've got. We don't judge. Because the truth is, you never really know what led someone there. And then last month, guess who walked in? Rick. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked broken, gaunt, hair gone white. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. He shuffled up to the desk while one of my staff was doing intake. I was in the back, but I heard his voice. It hit me like a freight train. I came out, and for a second I froze. My hands literally started shaking. He didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. I walked over, told my staff I'd take this one. I grabbed the clipboard, asked his name. He said it, and it felt like the world tilted. I wrote it down myself, and then I handed him a bedroll. He looked up at me, tired, hollow. "Thanks," he muttered. And I couldn't help it. I said, "You left me here once too." His eyes snapped up, and that's when it hit him. He knew. And I swear to God, I've never seen fear like that on a grown man's face. When his eyes locked on mine and recognition hit, the air in the room got heavy. Like everyone else in the shelter disappeared for a second. Just me and him. The man who left me at a gas station when I was 12, now standing in front of me asking for a blanket. His face changed in waves. First confusion, then realization, then this raw fear, like a kid caught stealing. Except he wasn't a kid. He was a grown man, and I was the one holding the clipboard, the pen, the authority. Wait, he stammered. You can't be. Yeah, I said. My voice was flat, but inside I felt like my heart was about to punch its way out of my chest. It's me. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared. His mouth opened like he wanted to apologize, but no words came. That silence. It was louder than anything he could have said. I wanted to scream at him, ask him if he remembered how hot that pavement was, how long I sat there waiting, how many nights I cried myself to sleep in strangers' houses because of him. But I couldn't. I had a line of people behind him waiting for a meal, a bed, a shred of dignity. My job wasn't to air out my trauma. My job was to keep the line moving. So I did. I handed him the bedroll, pointed to the spot near the back wall. That's yours for tonight. He looked at me like he wanted more, like he expected something. Forgiveness, maybe? A second chance? I turned away. The rest of the night, I couldn't focus. I tried to do my usual rounds, checking on folks, talking to the staff, making sure everyone had what they needed, but my head kept buzzing with that image of him sitting cross-legged on the floor with the blanket I gave him. He looked smaller than I remembered, and weaker, but all I could see was that smirk he had the day he left me, the way his car peeled out of that lot like I was nothing. It hit me in waves, rage, pity, confusion. Like, was this supposed to be some cosmic joke? Full circle karma? Because if so, why didn't it feel satisfying? Why didn't it feel like justice? I ended up in my office with the door closed, just sitting there staring at the wall. One of my staff, Maya, came in. She's been with me since almost the start, tough as nails, but with the kind of heart you want running a place like this. She noticed something was off. "You good?" she asked. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Define good. She tilted her head. "You've got that look. Like you're either about to break down or punch a wall." I told her. Not all of it. Not the whole history, but enough. That one of the new arrivals was my mom's old boyfriend. That he left me when I was a kid. That it wasn't some misunderstanding, it was intentional. She sat down across from me and just shook her head. "Damn," she whispered. "What are you gonna do?" And that's the question, right? What do you do when the man who ruined your childhood shows up begging for help in the shelter you built? I didn't know. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying different scenarios in my head. Confront him, tell him everything he stole from me. Or kick him out, let him rot on the street like he did to me. Or maybe help him, which felt twisted, unfair. By morning, I was running on fumes. The smell of coffee in the kitchen pulled me out there. A couple of our guests were already up, chatting, laughing. And there he was, sitting at the table, sipping from one of the chipped mugs. For a second, it was surreal. Like he was just another guy, no history between us. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. He opened his mouth. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. For everything." I froze. You ever hear an apology that feels like a slap? That's what it was. 2 words, a half-hearted attempt at making up for a lifetime of damage. He looked at me like that should be enough. And I realized something. He probably hadn't thought about me for years. Maybe decades. Meanwhile, I'd carried him like a stone in my chest all this time. And for him, it was just a shrug and a sorry. I didn't answer him. I just walked past, poured my coffee, and sat at the opposite table. But the thing is, the whole room went quiet for a second. People noticed. The vibe shifted. And it hit me. My guests didn't need to see me falling apart. They needed to see me steady. Consistent. If I let this man break me in front of them, what would that say about the safe space we'd built? So I decided. I'd keep him in the shelter like anyone else. He'd get food, a bedroll, a shower. But I wasn't going to give him what he wanted. Not the absolution, not the reunion, not the easy out. And yet, deep down, part of me wanted to sit him down and make him listen. Make him hear about every night I went hungry, every time I thought about ending it all, every scar he left behind without even touching me. But I didn't. Not yet. Because the truth is, when you've carried pain that long, you don't just drop it in one conversation. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to sit in that shelter a little longer. Feel the weight of being powerless, of depending on someone else's mercy. The same way I did at 12 years old. For the next few days, Rick stayed at the shelter. And every single day, it felt like I was walking around with a ghost. Not the kind of ghost that haunts you in the dark, but the kind that just sits across the room breathing, reminding you of everything you wanted to forget. He kept trying to make eye contact with me. At meal times, when we were handing out plates, when I'd do my rounds, I avoided him as much as possible. It wasn't just pettiness, it was self-preservation. Because every time I looked at him, 12-year-old me came screaming back. But Rick didn't let it go. He started trying. One morning I walked into the kitchen, and there he was, helping stack chairs after breakfast. Normally, we let the guests pitch in if they want to, but it's never required. Rick looked over at me, gave this half smile, like he thought he was proving something. "I can help out," he said, almost too loudly, like he wanted me to hear it. I didn't reply, just nodded and kept walking. Later that day, he came up to my office, knocked on the doorframe like he had any right to. "You got a minute?" he asked. I looked up from my paperwork, every nerve in my body firing at once. My staff wasn't around, and it was just him and me. The last thing I wanted was to be trapped in a room with him. But the director in me, the guy who runs a shelter, knew I couldn't just tell him to screw off like a child. "Fine," I said, voice flat. "What do you want?" He shuffled inside, closed the door behind him. He looked smaller, not physically, but like a man who'd been chipped away at for years. His hands fidgeted, picking at his nails. He started, then stopped. His throat worked like the words were too heavy. "I need you to know I wasn't. I wasn't a good man back then. I know that. But life's been rough." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Life's been rough. That's what you're going with. He flinched. "I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I want to. I don't know. Make it right. Make it right." My voice was sharper than I intended. "You left a 12-year-old kid at a gas station, Rick. You told me to figure life out on my own. Do you have any idea what that does to someone?" His eyes dropped to the floor. For once, he didn't have a quick line or excuse. Just silence. And in that silence, something inside me cracked open. All the things I'd buried for 20 years came rushing out. "You think an apology fixes that? You think stacking chairs makes up for nights I went to bed hungry, for homes that treated me like a paycheck, for the fact that I grew up believing I was disposable?" My voice shook, and I hated that it did, but I couldn't stop. Rick's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. And maybe he meant it this time. Maybe he didn't. I couldn't tell. I pointed to the door. "Get out." He hesitated, like he wanted to say more. Then he left. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone had gone to bed. The building was quiet except for the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I felt hollow, like I'd waited years for that confrontation, and when it finally came, it didn't give me the closure I wanted. Because here's the truth. Nothing he could say would ever undo what he did. There's no apology big enough, and part of me hated myself for even wanting one. The next few days, I watched him. Not intentionally. But you can't not notice someone who used to be the center of your universe, even if that universe was toxic. He was just sad, helping out where he could, eating quietly, sleeping on the floor with everyone else. And then something weird happened. One of our younger guests, this kid named Marcus, maybe 19, started talking to Rick. At first, I wanted to shut it down. I didn't want Rick anywhere near him. But then I overheard their conversation one evening while I was walking by. Marcus was venting about how his own stepdad used to call him worthless, and Rick listened. He didn't give advice, he didn't preach. He just listened, really listened, in a way I don't remember him ever doing with me. It pissed me off, and it confused me, because why could he show up for some random kid in the shelter, but not for me when I needed him? That night, I went home and sat in the dark of my crappy little apartment, just thinking. The world felt upside down. I was the one who built this place, who kept it running, who gave people hope. And yet somehow, Rick had found a way to plant himself in it like he belonged. It felt like a test. Like the universe was asking me, are you really the man you think you are? Or are you still that abandoned kid? I don't know which one I am yet. But I do know this. Seeing him broken down, dependent on the very kind of place he told me I'd need someday, it messed with my head. He once said I'd never survive, that I'd end up like him. And now here we were, him on the floor of my shelter, me with the clipboard, deciding who gets a bed. And still, I couldn't shake the question. Was I supposed to let this destroy me again? Or was I supposed to find a way to rise above it? I didn't have an answer, but I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Rick didn't stop after I threw him out of my office. If anything, it made him try harder. He started showing up early for chores, helping the staff set up meals, even sweeping the hallways like he owned the place. Every time, I'd catch him glancing at me like he was waiting for approval. Like he thought if he just worked hard enough, I'd pat him on the head and say, Good job, Dad. It was infuriating. But the kicker was Marcus. Marcus had this energy, loud, goofy, always cracking jokes even when he was dead tired. The kind of kid who reminded me of myself before everything went sideways. And for some reason, he latched onto Rick. I'd walk into the common room and see them sitting together, talking like they'd known each other for years. One night, I overheard Marcus laughing. Man, you're like the dad I never had. I swear, I almost lost it right there. My stomach flipped, my chest tightened. I had to leave the room before I said something that would have blown everything up. Later, when Marcus came to grab seconds from the kitchen, I pulled him aside. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Be careful around him. Marcus frowned. Why? He's chill. Actually listens, you know? Not like most people. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him everything. That this so-called chill guy once abandoned a 12-year-old at a gas station like trash. That he had no right to be anyone's father figure. But Marcus looked at me with those hopeful eyes, and I froze. Because if I shattered that illusion, what did I replace it with? Another reminder that adults can't be trusted? That everyone leaves? God knows he's already had enough of that. So I just said, trust me. He's not who you think. Marcus shrugged. Maybe people change. Then he walked off, plate in hand, leaving me standing there like an idiot. That line stuck with me all night. Maybe people change. Do they? I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed that day at the gas station over and over. Rick's voice saying, figure life out on your own. The way his taillights disappeared down the road. The crushing silence afterward. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't just being a bad man back then. That was a choice. A deliberate choice to leave a kid behind. And yet here he was, decades later, sitting in my shelter, somehow worming his way into people's good graces. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I cornered him in the hallway while he was folding blankets. You need to stop, I told him. He looked up, startled. Stop what? This act. Playing Mr. Helpful. Trying to be some kind of father figure. You don't get to rewrite who you are. He swallowed hard, hands tightening around the blanket. I'm just trying to contribute. I don't want to sit around useless. Bullshit, I snapped. You're trying to fix something you broke 20 years ago, but here's the thing. You can't. You can't undo leaving a kid at a gas station. You don't get to play hero now. His face fell. For a second, I thought he might yell back, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. You're right, he murmured. I can't fix it. But I think about it every day. That stopped me. Not because I believed him, but because part of me wanted to. I shook my head. Thinking about it doesn't change what it did to me. Then I walked away before he could answer. Later, during dinner service, Marcus came at me again. Why do you hate him so much? He asked, straight up, no filter. Because I know who he is, I said. You don't think people can grow? He pushed. Like, yeah, maybe he screwed up, but he's trying now. Doesn't that count? I stared at him, plate in my hand, trying to find the right words. I wanted to protect Marcus from the truth, but I also wanted to unload everything. Finally, I said, some mistakes are too big to come back from. He frowned, clearly not satisfied, but he dropped it. That night, Rick knocked on my office door again. This time, I didn't tell him to leave. Maybe I was too tired, maybe I wanted answers. He stepped inside, hands stuffed in his pockets. I know I've got no right to ask you for anything, he said quietly. But can I at least explain? I leaned back in my chair. Explain what? Why you decided a 12-year-old didn't deserve a ride home. His face crumpled. I was angry. At your mom. At life. At myself. I thought I was teaching you some twisted lesson, like tough love. But the second I drove away, I knew I'd done something unforgivable. And I didn't come back because I was a coward. I stared at him, trying to process. He actually looked ashamed, and that almost made it worse. Do you know what happened to me after that? I asked. My voice shook, but I didn't care. Do you know how many nights I went hungry? How many times I thought about ending it? How many families I got tossed through because of you? His eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he whispered again, voice breaking. I can't change it. I wish I could, but I can't. And for the first time, I saw him not as the monster from my childhood, but as a broken, pathetic old man. A man who'd ruined lives, including mine, and now had nothing left. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt empty. I told him to leave my office. He did, quietly. And I sat there in the dark, wondering if maybe Marcus was right. Maybe people can change. But even if they do, does that erase what they did? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the kid in me wanted revenge, and the man in me wanted peace. And I wasn't sure which one was going to win. The breaking point came about a week later. It was late, close to lights out. Most of the guests were already bedded down, and the staff had gone home for the night. I was making rounds when I heard voices coming from the corner near the cots. One of them was Marcus. The other was Rick. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the tone was sharp. I walked closer. "You don't get it," Marcus was saying. "You can't just say sorry and think it's fine." "I know that," Rick shot back, his voice low but urgent. "I know I screwed up worse than you can imagine. But I'm trying now. Doesn't that matter for something?" Marcus shook his head. "Not to him. Not after what you did." That's when I realized Marcus knew. Somehow, Rick had told him. My stomach dropped. I stepped into the room, and both of them turned to me. Marcus looked guilty, like he'd been caught. Rick just looked exhausted. "You told him?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Rick nodded slowly. He deserved to know the truth. If you weren't going to tell him, I had to. I clenched my fists. "You don't get to decide what I share about my life." Marcus stood up, hands out like he was calming a fight. "Look, I get it. You're angry. You have every right. But, man, he's different now. I can see it. He messed up. Bad. But maybe he's not the same guy anymore." I stared at Marcus, at his wide, hopeful eyes. He wanted so badly to believe people could change, because if Rick could, maybe his own stepdad could too. I understood that. I even respected it. But it wasn't his wound to carry. "Marcus," I said quietly, "you don't know what it's like to be 12 years old and realize nobody's coming back for you." He didn't argue. He just looked at me with something like pity, and that stung more than anything. Rick finally spoke. "You don't have to forgive me. Hell, I don't expect you to. But I need you to know I regret it. Every day since, I've regretted it." His voice cracked. "I see your face when I try to sleep. I hear your voice. You think I forgot you? I didn't. I just couldn't face it." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The part of me that had waited years for those words wanted to collapse. The other part wanted to spit in his face. "You don't get points for regret," I said. My voice was cold, steady. "You don't get to show up at my shelter and rewrite who you are. You left me, and I live with that every single day. You don't get to dump that guilt on me now." Rick's shoulders sagged like the fight went out of him. He sat down heavily on his cot, hands covering his face. And for the first time, I saw him cry. Not a couple tears, full, body-shaking sobs. I thought it would feel good, watching him break, seeing him finally crumble under the weight of what he'd done. But it didn't. It just felt empty. Marcus sat there in the silence, glancing between us. Finally, he said, "So what now?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at Rick, this shell of a man who once held my entire world in his hands and dropped it on the pavement like trash. And I realized something. He didn't need me to punish him. Life already had. The years had chewed him up and spit him out. He was alone, homeless, broken. The kind of man who ends up in a shelter begging for a blanket. I could scream. I could rage. I could throw him out on the street. But nothing I did would ever compare to what he'd already done to himself. And maybe, just maybe, holding on to that anger was only poisoning me. I took a deep breath. What now is, you stay here as long as you need. You eat, you sleep, you help if you want. But don't mistake that for forgiveness. You don't get that from me. Not now. Maybe not ever. Rick looked up at me through red, swollen eyes. He nodded slowly. "That's fair." Marcus exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. I left the room after that, went to my office, shut the door, and sat in the dark. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't from rage. It was from release. I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or punish him. The fact that I was standing there, running a shelter, giving hope to people like him, was enough. He'd said I wouldn't survive. He'd said the world wouldn't carry me. But I'd built something bigger than him, bigger than what he tried to take from me. I'd survived. I'd done more than that. I'd thrived. And him? He was just another man with a bedroll on the floor. The next morning, I watched him eat breakfast quietly at the corner table. For the first time, I didn't feel like a 12-year-old again. I felt like a man who had the power to choose. And I chose to let go, not for him, but for me. Because he left me once at a gas station, and I carried that wound for decades. But I wasn't going to let him leave me there forever.